The invitation looked fake. Elias then turned it over for the fourth time, held it to the light, then squinted at the embedded imperial seal as if it might suddenly confess to fraud out of guilt. "It's still real," said Mara, not looking up from her console. "You've checked it like a man hoping it will explode and solve his social obligations." "I'm a scientist," Elias said. "Suspicion is a professional courtesy. You study alien biochemistry in a station that leaks when people sneeze too hard. Nobody from the imperial court invites people like us anywhere unless they want a sample, a scapegoat, or entertainment. That is exactly why I'm suspicious." Mara finally looked at him. "You are entertainment." Elias sighed and dropped into the chair opposite her. Outside the port window, the station's outer ring rotated with a faint metallic groan, dragging a field of stars into slow motion. Cargo drones drifted past like tired insects. Somewhere overhead, a pipe knocked 3 times in a way that suggested either thermal expansion or a ghost with poor rhythm. On the desk between them, the invitation glowed softly in imperial blue. "By decree of Her Radiant Majesty Aelora Ve Solen, Sovereign of Lyrathian, Keeper of the Conquered, Voice of the 12 Spiral Thrones." "It goes on like this for another paragraph," Elias muttered. "By the time they finish naming her, the banquet will be over. Read the important part again." He cleared his throat with exaggerated dignity. "You are invited to attend the grand convergence banquet in the celestial hall of Orem Station, in honor of the renewal of imperial unity and the ceremonial first bite." Mara leaned back. "There, that part, why you? According to the attached note, I was recommended for my work on cross-species toxin adaptation." She stared at him. He stared back. Then they both said at the same time, "That seems bad." Mara pointed at him. "Exactly. Nobody recommends a toxin specialist to a ceremonial dinner because they're hoping the soup will be emotionally fulfilling." Elias rubbed a hand over his face. "Maybe they want consultation. Maybe it's symbolic. Maybe some noble read one of my papers and decided I was useful." Mara's expression became openly sympathetic. "Elias, that is the saddest fantasy I have ever heard." He picked up the invitation again. It was elegant, expensive, and smug. It had the quiet confidence of an object that knew it belonged in rooms with polished floors and people who pronounced their own titles as if they were doing language a favor. A smaller line shimmered at the bottom. "Formal attire required. Human panic tolerated within reason." He blinked. "All right, that part I respect." Mara barked a laugh. "Now you have to go." "I was already going." "No, before you were investigating whether you could catch a radiation fever in the next 72 hours. Now your pride is involved." "My pride is rarely involved. My anxiety, yes. My dignity sometimes. Pride only attends special occasions. Like interstellar banquets." "Exactly." She rose, came around the desk, and straightened the collar of his station jacket with the grim focus of someone preparing a friend for either a wedding or an execution. On this station, the distinction often depended on catering. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "Do not insult anyone important. Do not explain fermentation toxins to royalty unless they ask. Do not get into an argument about scientific rigor with a duke. I've never argued with a duke. You would if one said something stupid. That's true. And if the queen speaks to you, try not to answer with a noise." "Good. We're making progress." He smiled despite himself. It faded as he looked at the invitation one more time. The Queen of Lyrathian, Aelora Ve Solen. He knew her the way everyone did. Official broadcasts, archival portraits, state transmissions translated into 20,000 local dialects. She was famous for impossible poise, brutal intelligence, and a diplomatic memory so precise that she once corrected a governor on a promise he had made 9 years earlier in a corridor with no witnesses. She was also not human. Most of the dominant bloodlines of old Lyrathian had retained a near-human form, but not entirely. The Queen's people were taller on average, longer-lived, and marked by those unmistakable ears. Long, elegant, swept slightly back from the head, sensitive enough to detect minute shifts in tone and vibration. Station gossip claimed they could hear a lie. Scientific literature said that was an exaggeration. Station gossip had then replied that scientific literature had clearly never been interrogated by an empress. Elias had never met her. He had never expected to. Now he had 3 days to get to Orem Station, find something appropriate to wear, and avoid dying of second-hand embarrassment in a room full of imperial elites. Say something reassuring, he told Mara. She considered. If you humiliate yourself, it'll happen in a historic location. That's not reassuring. It's the best I've got. The shuttle to Orem was cleaner than any vessel Elias trusted. Nothing creaked. Nothing sparked. The seats adjusted automatically when he sat down, which he found invasive. The attendant was a service drone with a voice so warm and pleasant that he suspected it had once been programmed for hostage negotiation. "Welcome aboard," it said. "Your comfort is our priority." "That makes one of us," Elias muttered. He spent the first hour pretending to read briefing materials and the second actually reading them because they became alarming. The Grand Convergence was not merely a banquet. It was a performance of stability. Sector lords, military envoys, trade representatives, dynastic heirs, scholars, and foreign dignitaries would all be present. The first bite, taken by the queen before the assembled court, symbolized trust in the empire's shared table and the interdependence of its worlds. That, Elias said softly to himself, is far too much symbolism to put on one mouthful of food. The drone glided past. "Would you like refreshments?" "No, sedatives." He looked up. "Is that a normal option?" "For human guests attending court functions, yes." He thought about it, disturbingly thoughtful. "Shall I bring two?" "No." The approach to Orem Station stole the breath from him in spite of himself. It hung against the starfield like a machine-built sunrise. Concentric gold-white rings, docking spires shining with traffic streams, mirrored arrays turning light into geometry. Civilian ships, military carriers, diplomatic barges, and cargo haulers moved around it in ordered currents, all drawn into the orbit of imperial gravity long before physics got involved. Elias pressed a hand to the viewport. "Show off," he whispered. The shuttle slid into a receiving corridor lined with light. As the clamps locked, his reflection flickered in the glass. Dark hair he had failed to tame, tired eyes, face too ordinary for the kind of place that etched itself into history. He stood, collected his case, and immediately nearly dropped it when the cabin chimed. A final message unfolded from the briefing packet, tagged for personal delivery. "Guest Elias Venn. Her Majesty has expressed specific interest in your attendance." He frowned. That was all. No explanation. No context. Just that one line, somehow more unsettling than the pageantry, the protocols, and the sedative menu combined. The cabin door opened. Beyond it, a reception hall spread out in polished silver and pale light. Imperial attendants moved with choreographed precision. Armed guards stood like statues designed by paranoid artists. Far above, a vaulted dome displayed a living map of the empire, its stars pulsing in slow waves. A woman in formal court attire approached him with the smooth efficiency of someone who had never once misplaced a thought. "Dr. Elias Venn," she said, "welcome to Orem Station." "Doctor is generous," he said. "I mostly answer to Elias." Her expression did not change, but he had the distinct impression she had filed that away as evidence. "I am chamber attaché Senrad. I will escort you to your quarters and review ceremony protocol." "Wonderful. I love protocols. Their rules-wearing jewelry." For the first time something shifted in her face, not quite a smile. More the idea of one passing through on official business. "This way." He followed her across the reception floor, his case rolling behind him. From somewhere deeper in the station, beyond the sealed corridors and layered security and impossible luxury, music drifted through the air, soft, distant, ceremonial. The banquet had not yet begun. But already, without understanding why, Elias felt that something in this place was waiting for him. Elias discovered, within the first 20 minutes of arriving at his quarters, that imperial hospitality was just surveillance with better upholstery. The room was enormous. Not cozy enormous. Intimidating enormous. The sort of enormous that suggested emperors believed personal space should come with weather patterns. One wall displayed a soft projection of Aurum Station's inner ring rotating through artificial dusk. Another shifted to a star map whenever he got too close, as if encouraging him to remember how small he was. A tray waited on the central table with fruit, mineral water, and a folded card. For our honored guest. Please do not attempt to recalibrate the room systems. He stared at it. I haven't touched anything yet. The room remained unconvinced. He set his case down and did a careful circuit, the way a field biologist might examine the nest of a clever predator. The wardrobe opened when he approached. The washroom lights brightened based on what he assumed was emotional distress. The bed adjusted its softness after a single experimental sit, then kept adjusting as though it had become deeply invested in his spinal alignment. He poked the side console. A menu appeared. Ambient tone selection. Serene, regal, diplomatic, restorative silence of the outer veil. Who names these? A voice answered from the ceiling. Would you like recommendations based on your species? Elias nearly walked into the table. Absolutely not. Understood, no recommendations. Quiet judgment mode activated. He looked up. Was that a joke? No, that's worse. He chose plain lighting, ignored the fruit, and opened the garment case he had borrowed from Mara. Inside lay the formal outfit she had sourced from a trader who claimed it was court-adjacent, which Elias suspected meant rejected by someone with standards. It was dark, clean-lined, and only slightly too elegant for him, which in practical terms meant he looked like a respectable academic who had accidentally wandered into an inheritance dispute. A chime sounded at the door. He opened it to find chamber attaché Sen Rad holding a thin metallic slate. I am here to review protocol, she said. Of course you are. I was just being quietly overwhelmed. That is an acceptable state for first-time guests. She entered. He noticed that she looked even more severe at close range, though not unkind. Her own ears, long, graceful, unmistakably Lyran, tilted with subtle precision as she took in the room, him, the untouched refreshments, and the fact that he had not yet broken anything. A promising start, she said. That is the nicest thing anyone in authority has ever said to me. She activated the slate. A projection sprang up between them, a rendering of the celestial hall, complete with seating rings, ceremonial approaches, and highlighted zones that probably meant don't step here unless you enjoy public ruin. Sen began without flourish. You will enter with the third invited group. You will follow the indicated light path. You will bow once upon presentation to the dais. How much of a bow? She tapped the projection. A figure bent forward. 15 degrees. That's specific, yes. What happens if I do 12? People notice. And if I do 20, people also notice. So the empire is held together by angles. In part. Elias folded his arms. Comforting, she continued. No one speaks during the opening ritual. No one crosses the inner floor without summons. No one approaches Her Majesty while the ceremonial meal is being set. He nodded. That part I assumed. Good. Assumptions are risky, but in this case they have spared you. The projection shifted. Names appeared around the seating tiers, each marked with crest, rank, and planetary affiliation. Elias squinted. This is a military commander. Yes. And that one's a trade chancellor. Yes. And that one is a hereditary moon prince. He glanced up. There are moon princes. There are several, they vary in usefulness. He snorted before he could stop himself. Sen's expression remained neutral, but her ears twitched once, which he was beginning to suspect meant amusement. She dismissed the seating chart and brought up a new file. There is one more matter. Her Majesty requested a summary of your work prior to your arrival. He paused. Why? I was not informed. Was anyone? That would imply a culture of overcommunication. We are not that fortunate. He gave her a look. That was definitely a joke. No, you people are very alarming. We have been told. She handed him the slate. On it was a concise profile. Elias Venn, xenobiological toxin specialist, published research on adaptive metabolism, environmental biohazards, molecular mimicry, and cross-species poisoning pathways. There was even a formal portrait pulled from his station records, and he hated it instantly. I look like I'm apologizing to furniture. You looked directly into the scanner. It was bright. He returned the slate. So the Queen read this, yes, and expressed specific interest in my attendance. Yes. Elias exhaled slowly. That's not unsettling at all. No, no, it's perfect. I've always dreamed of attending a banquet where the most powerful person in known space has pre-read my professional anxieties. Sen regarded him for a long moment. You are more unusual than the briefing suggested. I choose to hear that as praise. As you wish. After protocol came etiquette. After etiquette came a horrifyingly detailed explanation of cutlery hierarchy among the central dynasties. By the end, Elias had learned that there were 5 distinct forms of formal refusal, 3 categories of acceptable silence, and 1 spoon that should never be used unless invited by nobility of the old river houses. What happens if I use the wrong spoon? He asked. Nothing immediate. That's the most sinister answer possible. Accuracy often is. When she finally left, he sat alone in the quiet room and tried to imagine the next day unfolding in any way that did not end with him becoming a cautionary anecdote. He lasted 11 seconds before standing back up and pacing. Her Majesty requested a summary of your work, not a generic guest list review, not diplomatic courtesy, specific interest. He replayed the wording until it lost all meaning, then gained worse meanings. Perhaps she consulted specialists before every banquet. Perhaps there had been prior threats. Perhaps he was one of several academic ornaments added to the guest list to impress someone with a funding portfolio. Or perhaps something was wrong. He hated that last possibility because it was the one his instincts kept nudging toward, like a child pointing at a cracked airlock and asking whether that was supposed to whistle. He sat at the table, activated his portable reader, and pulled the public technical dossier on Convergence catering standards. If someone had walked in at that moment, they would have seen a man in formal wear spending his evening voluntarily reading food security regulation across 13 systems. To be fair, Elias had made worse choices. The ceremonial meal, according to tradition, incorporated symbolic ingredients from allied sectors. Each item was tested, scanned, and replicated under controlled conditions. Biological variance was tightly regulated. Supply chains were secured. Kitchen personnel were vetted through palace intelligence, military command, and, somewhat insultingly, cultural review panels. Because apparently treason can be detected through poor table manners, he murmured. He scanned further. No obvious vulnerabilities. No glaring gaps. No sane reason a toxin specialist would be specifically interesting unless someone expected the possibility of contamination, or someone wished to quietly evaluate how quickly he might notice it. He leaned back. That, he told the room, is a terrible thought. The ceiling said nothing, perhaps out of respect. Another chime cut through the silence. This one came from the wall display where a discreet message appeared. All banquet guests are invited to attend the pre-ceremonial promenade in the Western Observation Gallery. Attendance optional. He narrowed his eyes at that final phrase. Optional, he said, which in court language probably means mandatory unless one is dead, dying, or outranks gravity. He went anyway. The Western Observation Gallery was less a corridor than a declaration of imperial vanity. Transparent panels arched overhead, revealing the black ocean of space and the jeweled sweep of dock traffic beyond. Guests moved in curated clusters beneath it, each group radiating its own social weather. Military uniforms gleamed. Formal robes shimmered with responsive threadwork. Diplomatic implants flickered softly at throats and temples. Elias entered, and for one excruciating instant it felt as though everyone noticed. Then he remembered that this was a gathering of people important enough to ignore strangers professionally. A servant drone offered him a glass of something pale and sparkling. "What is it?" "Non-intoxicating," said the drone. "That is not a flavor. It is for many guests, sir." He accepted it on principle. The conversations around him drifted in fragments. Mining concessions in the Varen Belt, naval repositioning was inevitable. The Queen's patience should not be mistaken for softness. "If the Moon Prince speaks tonight, I'm leaving." That last one, Elias felt, had a universal dignity to it. He was considering strategic retreat to the nearest decorative pillar when a hush moved through the gallery. Not complete silence, not yet, but a subtle narrowing of attention. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-syllable. Senrad appeared at the far threshold. Then beside her, Queen Aelora entered the gallery. Elias had seen official images. They had not been lies. They had simply been insufficient. She moved with the kind of calm that changed the air around it. Tall, poised, composed beyond imitation. Her face was human enough to invite recognition and alien enough to unsettle certainty. And her ears, long, elegant, swept back from her dark hair, gave every tilt of her attention a precision more cutting than any crown. People bowed. Elias remembered, one heartbeat late, that he was also people. He began his 15-degree bow, misjudged the timing, corrected halfway through, and nearly headbutted his own glass. Excellent, he thought. Assassinated by etiquette. When he straightened, Aelora was already moving through the gathered court, speaking to dignitaries with measured warmth. But then her gaze shifted. It settled on him, not past him, not vaguely in his direction, on him. And to Elias' growing alarm, she changed course. By the time Aelora reached him, Elias had already considered 3 escape routes, 2 plausible medical emergencies, and 1 deeply dishonorable plan involving pretending to be a decorative scholar from a minor lunar archive. Unfortunately, none of them could be executed without moving, and moving seemed unwise while the Queen of the Empire was looking directly at him. "Dr. Elias Venn," she said. Her voice was calm, low, and precise enough to make every surrounding conversation die of natural causes. He bowed again because panic enjoyed repetition. "Your Majesty, I hope Orem Station has received you well." "Yes," he said, "though I remain slightly suspicious of the furniture." A pause followed. Then, to the quiet horror of half the gallery and the fascination of the other half, the Queen smiled. It was not large. It was not theatrical. It was simply real enough to cause a nearby nobleman to almost drop his drink. "Our furnishings have that effect on some guests," she said. "They can be overconfident. I felt judged by a bed. That is because it was judging you." A sound escaped Elias before he could stop it. It might have been a laugh. It might also have been the noise a man made when he realized he was exchanging jokes with a woman whose signature could rearrange star systems. Aelora studied him for a moment, and he became acutely aware of her eyes, of the subtle angle of those long ears, of the sense that her attention did not skim over surfaces but went quietly beneath them. "I have read your work," she said. "That is still unsettling," Elias admitted. "Why? Most people who read my work do so because something has already gone wrong. That is not entirely untrue." There it was again. Not a smile exactly, but something close enough to warmth to throw the whole room off balance. A cluster of nobles nearby were pretending not to listen with the intense concentration of professionals. Aelora seemed not to notice, which almost certainly meant she noticed everything. "Your paper on protein mimicry in mixed atmosphere ecosystems," she said. "The one involving adaptive marine spores from Belith IV." Elias blinked. "You read that?" "I did. That paper is very technical. I am the Queen, Dr. Venn. I do occasionally read." He stared for half a beat too long. "I meant no insult." "I know, you meant surprise. That too." She inclined her head slightly. Your conclusion was elegant. No one has ever called my conclusions elegant before. Usually they call them troubling. Troubling and elegant are not mutually exclusive. Your Majesty, Elia said carefully, that is one of the most alarming things anyone has ever said to me. This time her smile was unmistakable. From behind her shoulder, Sen Rad stood at a tactful distance, looking exactly like a woman who had predicted none of this and approved of even less. Alara gestured lightly toward the view beyond the gallery. Walk with me. It was not phrased as a command, which somehow made refusal even less imaginable. Elias fell into step beside her. The gallery opened before them in a slow curve of starlit glass and polished floor. Guests bowed as they passed. Some did so gracefully. Others looked as if they had developed sudden spinal respect. Elias tried to keep his stride normal and not like that of a man who had accidentally wandered into a historical event. You dislike formal gatherings, Alara said. It was not a question. I dislike gatherings where one wrong fork could start a diplomatic incident. A prudent concern. Is it true there's a spoon that can insult a river dynasty? She turned her head toward him. Who told you that? Attaché Rad. I see she has been thorough. That's a very elegant way of saying terrifying. Sen Rad prefers precision. I noticed. Alara's gaze shifted briefly toward the stars. And you prefer disorder that produces useful truths. Elias looked at her. That sounded suspiciously like analysis. It was. Should I be flattered or worried? Yes. He laughed outright then, too surprised not to. A few nearby dignitaries nearly looked offended on the Empire's behalf. They continued in silence for a few steps. Elias was aware of everything at once. The faint hum of station systems through the floor, the movement of patrol craft beyond the glass, the soft click of ceremonial jewelry from passing officials, the queen beside him moving with impossible composure. Up close, there was something more unsettling about her than beauty, though beauty was certainly present. It was the sense of control, not coldness, not distance exactly, but an extraordinary restraint, as if every word she chose had survived careful internal selection. Yet none of it felt mechanical. If anything, it made the rare moments of humor sharper, more intimate. You requested my attendance specifically, he said, before caution could stop him. I did. May I ask why? You may. He waited. Alara glanced at him and he realized too late that he had just lost a contest whose rules he had not known. You are not answering, he said. No, that feels unfair. It is one of the few luxuries of my position. He sighed. I walked into that. You did. They reached a quieter section of the gallery where the crowd thinned. A pair of maintenance drones passed on the outer hull beyond the glass, tiny against the station's vast curve, their tool arms flashing. Alara rested one hand lightly on the rail. Tell me, Dr. Venn, if you were asked to design a perfect ceremonial meal for 20 species, how would you do it? He frowned. Poorly. Be serious. I am serious. Perfection and digestion are ancient enemies. He thought a moment. I'd simplify the symbolic layers, reduce compound overlap, limit metabolic unknowns, keep the presentation dramatic enough to satisfy politicians and the chemistry boring enough to satisfy people who enjoy surviving. Boring chemistry, she said. In food, yes, very strong preference. And if tradition resisted, tradition resists everything. If tradition had its way, half the galaxy would still be treating radiation with prayer and polished stones. Alara's ears angled slightly, not back, not forward, but with a minute shift that Elias had begun to understand as interest sharpened by caution. You are unusually willing to criticize inherited structures in front of a monarch. I'm a scientist. We criticize structures for exercise. And if the structure is an empire, that depends. Is the empire edible? For one terrible second, Elias thought he had gone too far. Then Alara exhaled what was unmistakably a laugh. Light, brief, entirely devastating. Half the observation gallery felt it without understanding why. Careful, she said. If anyone hears you, they may assume I approve of insolence. Do you? Only when it is intelligent. Well, Elias said, that removes several people from consideration. Aelara's expression changed by a fraction, not laughter this time, something more inward, almost tired beneath the polish. You are observant, she said. That is a dangerous compliment coming from you. It is not a compliment. All right, that is a dangerous statement coming from you. She let the silence sit a moment, then said, the banquet tomorrow matters more than appearances suggest. He looked at her because of the first bite, because symbols are often the only language power can speak without translating itself. That sounds exhausting. It is. He hesitated. Then why do it? Aelara turned fully toward the stars beyond the glass, and when she answered her voice was quieter. Because this empire was not built from similarity, it was built from contradiction, species that should never have trusted one another. Worlds with histories written in blood and vacuum. The ritual says we sit at one table anyway. Elias studied her profile, and you believe that. I enforce it, she said. That wasn't my question. Her gaze stayed on the dark. No, she said. Something passed between them then. Not agreement exactly, not understanding complete enough to name, but the recognition of a line honestly drawn. Before Elias could decide whether to apologize for pushing too far, a figure approached at measured speed from the lower terrace. Tall, formal, adorned with enough military insignia to intimidate a small moon. Your Majesty, he said, bowing. Aelara straightened by a degree so small it should not have mattered, yet the entire air around her changed. High Commander Sarek, preparations for tomorrow are complete, Sarek said. Then his eyes moved to Elias. Dr. Venn. There was nothing openly hostile in his tone. That made it worse. Elias inclined his head. Commander. Sarek's gaze held his for a heartbeat too long, as if deciding where to file him. Curiosity, nuisance, or future problem. I was unaware the scientific guest list included promenade consultation, Sarek said. Aelara answered before Elias could invent a regrettable reply. I value informed company. Of course, Sarek said. The words were obedient. The silence under them was not. Aelara turned slightly. Was there anything else? No, Your Majesty. Sarek bowed again and withdrew. He did not look back, which Elias thought was exactly what a man looked like when he very much wanted to look back. Well, Elias murmured. He seemed cheerful. Aelara's mouth shifted. That was his warm manner. I'd hate to see cold. You may eventually. That, Elias said, is not encouraging. No, they resumed walking. Should I be concerned? He asked. You are a guest at court. Concern is appropriate. Panic is inefficient. I appreciate that the Empire distinguishes between them. We do what we can. As they neared the central section of the gallery again, the density of witnesses increased. Elias could feel eyes sliding toward them, away, then back again when propriety allowed. Aelara slowed. Tomorrow, she said, remain attentive. He glanced at her. That sounds more ominous than it should. It is meant to. Is there something I should know? Yes. He waited. Again nothing. He gave her a look. You do enjoy this. A little. That is deeply unfair for someone with your level of authority. No, she said. Elias looked toward the far end of the gallery where Aelara now stood among dignitaries, radiant and composed and impossible to read from this distance. Somewhere under the polished music and courtly ritual, a feeling had begun to take shape in him. Not fear exactly. Not yet. Something narrower, sharper. The sense of standing near a machine that looked perfect from the outside while one hidden part, deep within, had started to sound wrong. And for reasons he did not understand, the Queen had just asked him to listen for it. Elias did not sleep. He attempted it. The bed attempted it more aggressively. The lighting shifted into something labeled restorative harmony, which sounded like a threat disguised as kindness. At one point, the ceiling projected a gentle cascade of stars that dimmed in response to his breathing. Stop helping, he told it. I am calibrated to optimize rest, the ceiling replied. You are optimizing anxiety. Would you like sedation? No, would you like a story? I am currently inside one. There was a pause. Would you like a different story? No. He turned onto his side, stared at the wall, then sat up again 10 seconds later. Remain attentive. It kept repeating in his mind with the stubbornness of a faulty alarm. By the time the room announced morning, he had reviewed the banquet protocols twice, reread his own research out of stress, and convinced himself of 3 mutually exclusive theories, all of them terrible. He dressed with care that bordered on superstition. The garment fit better than expected. The fabric adjusted subtly at the seams, responding to his posture like it had opinions. He decided not to think about that. A chime sounded. "Dr. Ven," came Senrad's voice from the door. "It is time." "Of course it is," he said to no one. He opened the door. Sen regarded him once briefly. "Acceptable. That's the nicest thing anyone in authority has said to me." Part 2. "You said that yesterday. I stand by it." They walked in silence through corridors that seemed to exist purely to remind guests they were being watched by architecture. Guards stood at intervals, not moving, not blinking, possibly not breathing. "Do they ever relax?" Elias whispered. "No, that's concerning. It is effective." They reached a waiting chamber where other guests had gathered in quiet clusters. Elias recognized none of them personally, but he recognized their types: the confident, the careful, the predatory, the bored. A man in layered ceremonial armor stood near the entrance, speaking to a group of officers. High Commander Sarek. Elias pretended to be deeply interested in the floor. "Do not avoid him," Sen said softly. "I'm not avoiding him. I'm strategically existing elsewhere. That will be interpreted as avoidance. Everything here is interpreted as something." "Yes, that's exhausting. It is." A signal tone sounded, soft but absolute. The doors ahead opened. Light spilled through. "It begins," Sen said. Elias took a breath he immediately regretted and stepped forward with the third group. The celestial hall unfolded before him like a statement written in gravity. Rows of tables arranged in perfect arcs, seats rising in tiers. Above, the dome displayed a living field of stars that shifted with slow, deliberate motion. At the center, the dais elevated, luminous, unavoidable. Music threaded the air, precise and measured, not loud, not soft, exactly enough to control the rhythm of movement. 15 degrees, Elias muttered to himself. He followed the path of light across the floor, careful not to deviate. Guests ahead of him bowed in sequence, smooth, practiced. He tried to match them. He did not. He corrected halfway through. Again. "This is a disaster," he whispered. "No one has died yet," said Sen somewhere behind him. "That's a low standard." He reached his position, sat, did not touch anything. The hall filled. Voices remained low, movement restrained. Everything seemed to operate under a shared understanding that something important was about to happen, and no one wanted to be the person who ruined it. Elias scanned the table before him. Multiple dishes, each arranged with mathematical precision. Utensils placed in a pattern that might have been symbolic or might have been designed to trap the uninitiated. "Which one insults the River Dynasty?" he murmured. "No talking," Sen said quietly. "Right." He shut his mouth. The music shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The doors at the far end of the hall opened. Queen Aelira entered. Silence followed her, not immediate, not abrupt. It moved outward from her like a ripple, swallowing sound until the hall held nothing but presence. Elias felt it settle in his chest. She moved to the dais. Every motion measured, every step exact. He watched her closely now. Not as a subject of distant fascination, as a system, as something that could, in theory, fail. Remain attentive. He focused. The attendants approached. The ceremonial dish was carried forward. It was placed before her with reverence that bordered on fear. Elias leaned forward just slightly. He examined it the way he would examine a sample in a lab. Color, texture, arrangement, everything appeared correct. Of course it did. No one poisoned a queen with something obvious. The attendants withdrew. Aelira lifted the utensil. The hall held its breath. Elias felt something tighten in his mind, a small detail, not visual, not at first, something else, a pattern. A memory. He stared harder, there. A faint shimmer at the edge of the garnish, barely visible, almost decorative. His pulse jumped. No, he whispered. Alara raised the first bite. Elias stood. The sound of his chair was louder than it had any right to be. Every head turned. Guards shifted. Hands moved toward weapons. Senrad went perfectly still. Elias stepped forward. This is a terrible idea, he thought. Then he said it anyway. Your Majesty, don't eat that. The words cut through the hall like a fracture. Silence collapsed into something sharper. Sarek moved first. Stop. Two guards advanced. Elias raised his hands. Wait. No one speaks during the ritual, Sarek said, voice cold. I know. Then you will be removed. Elias took another step. I need 5 seconds. You have none. Alara had not moved. The utensil hovered. Her eyes were on him. Not angry, not surprised, focused. Explain, she said. One word, everything stopped. Sarek hesitated. The guards froze mid-step. Elias swallowed. The garnish, he said. Look at it. It is ceremonial. It's wrong. How? It's mimicking bioluminescent plating, Elias said quickly. But the frequency is off, too stable. Real biological emission fluctuates. That's synthetic. Sarek's voice cut in. Speculation. Elias ignored him. It's not just decorative, he said. It's carrying something. Alara lowered the utensil by a fraction. Continue. Elias exhaled once. If I'm wrong, he said, I'll apologize and leave quietly. If I'm right, you are interrupting a sovereign ritual, Sarek snapped. And she's about to eat poison, Elias snapped back. The word landed, poison. It moved through the hall without sound. Alara's gaze did not leave Elias. Test it, she said. Sarek hesitated. Your Majesty, test it. A command this time, absolute. An attendant stepped forward with a scanner, quick, precise, professional. The device hovered over the plate, paused, adjusted. Then a sharp tone. Not loud, but unmistakable. The attendant froze. Sarek went still. The entire hall held a second, deeper silence. Report, Alara said. The attendant's voice was steady. Toxin detected. A ripple moved through the court. Not panic, worse. Recognition. Alara set the utensil down. Slowly, deliberately, she stood. Elias suddenly became aware that he had just interrupted the most important ritual in the Empire, accused someone of poisoning the Queen, and apparently been right. Well, he said quietly, that's not ideal. No one laughed. Alara stepped down from the dais. The movement broke something, not physically, something else, the structure of the moment. She crossed the distance between them. Guards did not stop her. Sarek did not speak. Elias did not move. She stopped in front of him. For a second, no one in the hall existed, only the two of them. You were attentive, she said. I try not to let people die at dinner, he replied. That is a commendable policy. I've had practice. Something shifted in her expression. Then, without warning, without hesitation, without explanation, she leaned forward and kissed him, in front of everyone. The hall did not react. It failed to react, like a system that had not been designed to process this input. Elias blinked, once, twice. Well, he said faintly, that's new. For 3 full seconds the Empire forgot how to behave. No one moved, no one spoke. Somewhere in the upper tiers, a glass hit the floor and shattered with the lonely dignity of an object that understood it had chosen a terrible moment. Elias remained exactly where he was, because his body had apparently concluded that any motion from this point onward would only make things worse. Alara stepped back first. Her expression was calm, entirely calm, which was, in Elias' view, deeply inconsiderate. The entire court stared at them with the haunted stillness of people witnessing an event their ancestors would be forced to discuss. Elias cleared his throat. Your Majesty, he said carefully, I feel I should mention that this has complicated my evening. A ripple went through the hall, not laughter, not quite, but the dangerous edge of it. Sarek recovered first. Seal the hall, he ordered. Guards moved instantly. Doors locked. Perimeter fields shimmered into place. The musicians, to their credit, stopped playing before anyone had to tell them to. Alara turned, and when she spoke, her voice cut clean through the room. No one leaves. No one transmits. Every dish is tested. Every attendant accounted for. Begin with the service chain for the ceremonial course. Yes, Your Majesty, said Senrad. Now the court moved, not chaotically, but with the frantic precision of people trying very hard to look composed while history kicked in the doors. Elias let out a breath. I should probably apologize for the interruption. Alara looked at him. You saved my life. Yes, but I also interrupted a sacred imperial ritual. You did, right in the middle of it. Yes, in front of everyone. She held his gaze for a beat. Also yes. He spread his hands a little. So you can see how I'm struggling to rank my accomplishments. Something like amusement touched her face again, brief and dangerous. You may postpone that effort. Two guards approached them, not threatening Elias exactly, but staying close enough to remind him that saving a queen did not instantly make one immune to procedure. Sarek came down from the dais, rigid with control. The toxin was embedded in a nutrient mimic, he said, calibrated to evade the first sweep. Elias nodded. I thought so. Sarek's eyes narrowed. You thought so. I did not know so. If I had known so, I would have found a less theatrical way to mention it. There was nothing less theatrical available, Senrad said, arriving beside them with a data slate in hand. The compound degraded under broad-spectrum scan. It only became visible under close, targeted analysis. Sarek's jaw tightened. Elias glanced between them. I'd like it noted for the official record that I prefer being correct in laboratories. It's much quieter. No one is writing the official record yet, Sarek said. They will, Elias replied. I assume badly. Alara extended her hand toward Sen. The attaché passed her the slate. The queen read rapidly, eyes sharpening. Kitchen access logs, she said. Cross-reference everyone who handled the ceremonial plating with corridor movement for the last 6 hours. It is already underway, Sen said. Expand to private service lifts. Sarek frowned. That would include restricted military corridors. Alara lifted her eyes from the slate. And? The commander held her gaze for half a second too long. That was when Elias understood what had been sounding wrong beneath everything else. Not one hidden flaw. Several. Interlocked. The banquet, the warning, the queen's unusual interest in his research, the commander's cold watchfulness, the tension under the promenade conversation. Alara had not invited him merely because he was clever. She had suspected vulnerability around the ritual, but not from where. She had wanted someone present who looked at living systems instead of political theater. And now that someone was standing in the middle of the theater trying not to faint artistically, Alara handed the slate back to Sen. Dr. Ven will remain with me. Sarek's head turned. Your Majesty, that is unwise. Unwise. Elias repeated softly. That's never good. Alara did not look away from Sarek. He identified the poison before your security did. My security contained the room, after he stopped me from eating it. The silence that followed had edges. Sarek inclined his head, but only just, as you wish. There it was again, obedience without surrender. Alara turned to Elias. Walk with me. He blinked. Again? Yes. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I would like to state for context that the first time we did this, no one had just watched you kiss me. A noble at a nearby table made a choking sound. Senrad did not visibly react, which meant she deserved military rank. Alara said, then let the court practice adaptation. He followed her. They moved through a side corridor off the main hall, trailed at a distance by Sen and 2 guards. The noise of the court dimmed behind sealed doors. Elias ran a hand over his face. I have several questions. I expected you would. The first is obvious. Yes, and what? He stared at her. You are astonishingly committed to making me say things out loud. It helps reveal priorities. My priority is understanding why the queen of a galactic empire kissed me after I stopped her from being poisoned. Alara kept walking for 3 steps. Because, she said at last, the old rites of my house include forms of acknowledgement no longer used in court. He stared. That was a formal acknowledgement. In origin, yes. In origin. She glanced at him. Cultures evolve. That is not a reassuring elaboration. Aelura's expression remained composed, but her ears tilted in that small way he had learned meant she was choosing honesty with effort. It was also not entirely formal. Elias nearly walked into the wall. "Oh," he said, "yes." They stopped in a secure chamber just beyond the inner ring. Displays ignited around them, service maps, bioscans, movement logs, ingredient chains, security overlays. It looked like a control room designed by someone who believed paranoia was an art form. Sen moved to one console. "We have a discrepancy." "Show me," Aelura said. A service lift log expanded. One authorized transfer. Then a second, then a gap. Elias stepped closer. "That gap shouldn't exist." "It was scrubbed," Sen said. "By whom?" Sarek answered from the doorway behind them. "By someone with command-level access." No one had heard him enter. Elias turned. "You really need to make more noise when arriving dramatically." Sarek ignored him. "We found a dead steward in auxiliary plating. Neural burn at the base of the neck. Clean, professional." "Convenient," Elias muttered. Sarek's eyes flicked to him. "You imply internal coordination. I imply that whoever did this knew exactly where scrutiny would land first." Aelura looked between the displays, then at Sarek. "The restricted corridor objection." He did not answer. That was answer enough. Sen turned from her console. 3 command authorizations access the service route within the relevant window. One is yours, Commander. One belongs to Logistics Marshal Taven. One belongs to Council Regent Hellion. Elias let out a low breath. "Excellent. A tidy little nest of influential people. I hate those." Sarek stepped closer to the display. "Hellion has argued for years that the convergence weakens sector autonomy." "And Taven?" Aelura asked. "Loyal in public, bitter in private. He lost 2 sons in the border pacifications." Elias looked at the Queen. "The Empire's shared table has enemies." "It always did," she said. "Yes, but today they nearly turned philosophy into garnish." Aelura's mouth twitched. An unpleasant sentence. An accurate one. What followed moved quickly, though not cleanly. Arrest orders. Security locks. Sector communications frozen. Sen coordinating personnel with the cool efficiency of a woman who had probably once strangled panic with her bare hands. Hellion was found trying to access a private shuttle. Taven, more stubborn, barricaded himself in a command archive and delivered an angry speech about dilution, compromise, and the rot of mixed loyalty before being stunned by his own adjutant, who apparently had limits. Sarek oversaw both captures personally. When he returned, the room fell quieter. "The conspiracy is contained," he said. Elias studied him. "Contained, for now." Aelura held Sarek's gaze. "And you?" His face did not change, but something in his posture did. A fraction. A surrender small enough to preserve dignity and large enough to matter. "I suspected dissent," he said. "Not this extent." "I did not speak because uncertainty inside the command structure can become contagion." "You should have spoken to me," Aelura said. "Yes," he replied. "I should have." Elias glanced between them and wisely said nothing, which was personal growth. Hours later, when the hall had been cleared, the evidence secured, and the Empire prevented, temporarily, from devouring itself in rumor, Aelura stood again before a smaller gathering of witnesses. No grand banquet now. No music. No impossible perfection. Just truth, tired and upright. "The ritual will continue," she said, "not because today was untouched by treachery, but because it was not ruled by it." A new plate was set. Verified 3 times, Elias noted with heartfelt approval. Aelura looked once toward him before taking the first bite. This time, no one interrupted. Afterward, the court exhaled like a body remembering it could survive. Later still, long after officials dispersed and the station lights had dimmed toward artificial night, Elias stood alone in the western observation gallery. Aelora joined him without announcement. "I leave tomorrow," he said. "I know. That feels abrupt, considering everything. History is often abrupt." He looked out at the stars. "I came here expecting a difficult dinner. Instead, I helped uncover a political assassination plot, embarrassed half the nobility, and got kissed by a queen." Aelora folded her hands behind her back. "A productive visit." He laughed softly. "I was going to say traumatic, but yours is better." Silence rested between them, easier now. Then Elias said, "Before this I was very good at observing things from a safe distance. And now I'm less impressed by safety." He glanced at her, still fond of it, but less impressed. Aelora considered that. "You stepped forward when every structure around you told you not to. I was terrified. Courage is rarely mistaken for comfort." He smiled. "That sounds like something engraved on imperial walls." "It is not. It should be." She turned toward him then, and for the first time since he had known her, there was almost no throne in her face, only the woman beneath the weight of it. "I asked for you specifically," she said, "because I suspected the banquet was vulnerable. But I also asked for you because your work suggested a mind that did not worship appearances." Elias was quiet. "You saw me," she said, "as mortal before you saw me as royal. That was not disrespect." "I know." Her voice softened. "It is why I trusted it." He looked down, then back up. "And the kiss?" Aelora's eyes held his. "The acknowledgement was formal. And the rest," she said, "was mine." He let that settle then. "That is still going to cause an administrative crisis." "Yes. Several, probably. Yes." "Good," Elias said. "I'd hate for my visit to feel forgettable." This time she laughed openly, and the sound seemed to belong more to the woman than the crown. When the departure hour came, Sen Rad escorted him to the shuttle. "At the risk of damaging your carefully maintained severity," Elias said, "I'd miss your company if you were less terrifying." Sen inclined her head. "You have improved marginally. I will treasure that." At the ramp he hesitated. "Will she be all right?" Sen looked toward the station beyond the glass. "She will be challenged. That is not the same as being imperiled." "Fair. She is less alone than she was yesterday." Elias absorbed that. Then he boarded. As the shuttle pulled away from Orem Station, he watched the great imperial structure recede into light and distance. He had arrived there as a man who believed usefulness meant staying at the edge of events, noticing what others missed and leaving the center to braver people. Now he knew better. Sometimes the center failed because everyone inside it had learned to protect the ceremony instead of the life within it. Sometimes one voice had to break the silence. His console chimed. A private transmission. He opened it. No seal. No formality. Just a single line. "Next time, Dr. Vin, try not to wait until the last second." He smiled despite himself and typed back. "Next time, Your Majesty, try not to make poison look ceremonial." The reply came almost immediately. "I will make no promises." Elias leaned back as the stars shifted outside the shuttle window. Behind him, an empire had survived its own fracture. Ahead of him, nothing was simple anymore. For the first time in a long while, that did not feel like a threat. It felt like a door.